Well, everyone, today's a big day because Jason and I, who were former Team House groupies, have now been elevated to running our own podcast. We're still on the still at the little table, 40 minutes. But in all seriousness, this podcast is meant to complement its big and more sophisticated brother, the Team House. I know that you're probably not used to hearing the term the Team House and sophisticated rolled up in the same sentence, but it's all relative. So in a moment, we're going to introduce ourselves. But I'm going to talk a little bit, very briefly, about what this podcast is about. Okay, and there's a lot of things it's not. It's not a partisan echo chamber. It's two guys who are reasonably well informed from their background, their experience, but most importantly, I hope have enough emotional intelligence between us not to let this just become again, an echo chamber or a slagging match. Um, so for me, I'm Andy. As I said, long time Team House groupie and former Marine, former founder of the Mozart Group. Now washed up doing podcasts for D Tacos. Actually, I'm very thrilled to be doing so. Jason, over to you.
Uh, Thanks, Andy. Jason. I'm also a longtime Team House fan. Jack and I go back to our days when I worked for him writing for SOFREP, and we've stayed friends ever since. Met Dave at the Team House as well, and I've been a guest a few times on there, co-hosted once, and I have a background, former Marine, 10 years, worked in nuclear security, and then did 8 years at CIA or Central Intelligence Agency. And I'm happy to be here and see where we go with this.
Right. And then for our women listeners in particular, D.
Mm. I'm
Not
Dimitri.
not just the ladies.
Yeah. Hi. Yeah, that's what I'm here for, the sex appeal. I'm Dimitri. I'm the producer of the Team House, and I think this is going to be a fun show. I was a huge fan of when you guys were on the show. I think you guys did a great job guest hosting the show. And we were sitting around like what would make sense in terms of a vertical for the Team House because we really try to showcase our guests. Would be something that's more topical, more current events driven, in terms of geopolitics, less so domestic current events. And I think you two guys would make like a perfect team. Uh, the two Marine thing, I did not, that's like a happy accident, I guess you can call it. It wasn't on purpose, Hopefully you guys don't blow it too bad.
Well,
Just
yeah, I mean, at least our you bring our collective IQ up at least to room temperature, D. Hey, so we've already blown through a few minutes here. They typically the episodes are going to be about 40, 45 minutes, so about the length of a commute or a PT session. And today, to jump right into it, of course, the elephant in the room is the much expected and assumed to be imminent retaliation strikes that the president and the administration have been talking about delivering against Iran and or proxies in retaliation for the hit by a drone on Tower 22. Jason, what do you are you familiar with Tower 22?
I am not. I can actually say that I'm the broad area. I have a little bit of knowledge in, but Tower 22, I have been trying to catch up on. So
Okay,
if you,
cool. All right, I planted that question on Jason, so that we can talk a little bit about Tower 22 without it appearing to be too much of a diversion for the more cognoscenti among our guests. Okay, so Tower 22 is it's an extremely small. If I use the term base, then I make it sound much grander than it is. It is a combat outpost essentially just within the Jordanian border, kind of in the tri-border area between Iraq, Syria, and Jordan. It's only about 6 miles, for instance, from the Iraqi border and uh, around the same actually to the Syrian border. Now, it's a bit of a shithole, and you may have this hasn't been news coverage of it yet from the of the drone strike. But what we are hearing is that it hit accommodation quarters. Now that makes it sound too grand. I will tell you that accommodation quarters, not only last time I was there, which was 3 years ago, but I'm told even up to until now was nothing like one might expect. But it was heavily sandbagged. And there were bunkers available and all of the above. It's very easy after an occasion like this to start, to talk about all the things that went wrong. So typically there's about 350 guys there, 300 to 350. That hasn't changed much since the United States started using Tower 22 in late 2014. And the reason why we use it, the reason why we have a garrison there is simply to supply another combat outpost called Al Tanf, which is 20 kilometers, 12 miles into Syria, almost directly north, actually a little bit northwest. Now, Al Tanf is extremely important to the United States. It's manned by a very small garrison, typically in soft terms, an AOB, a company of Army SF guys, plus a collection of indigenous soldiers and indigenous force, Syrians and
Andy, what does AOB mean?
yeah,
That's why you're here.
Yeah.
yeah, it was company level headquarters. You know what? Oh, I'm going. You know what? The Army SF community is going to just kill me. Alpha, the Bravo, something operating base Bravo, right? AOB. What does EA stand for? Alpha. No. God, you know what? Okay, I'm going to be lambasted by our listeners. You're talking about two Marines, but I'll remember what AOB stands for. But essentially, it is an Army SF company.
Is it an advanced operating base?
Yeah.
No. Is it?
I don't know, I looked up an acronym.
Main operations base or forward operating base.
You know what? We've already going to have like 5,000 emails from
It's okay. Right in the comments what you think
demanding
AOB
that
means.
we get taken off the air. Let me continue. Anyway, Al-Tanf, all right. Altogether, and numbers there vary, but it's seldom above 200 dudes. And Al-Tanf has been manned around the same time since 2015. The reason why Al-Tanf is important and the reason why we have a small garrison of special operations troops there, which is a great example, by the way, of SOF achieving strategic effect, is because of its location. All right, not just near the tri-border region, but it lies astride the old Baghdad-Damascus highway, which is now a weapons running route. And you've heard this term used many times. Part of the land bridge, right? That Iran has pretty much de facto established between, all the way to the sea across Iraq and Syria. So Al-Tanf is important. It's a thorn in the side of the Syrian regime. It's a thorn in the side, obviously, of Iranians and the Russians there too. But it's of great importance to the US, and because of that, Tower 22 is important. And why are they all there? Well, they're there partly, of course. Presence in Syria, which is probably the most volatile. We thought the most volatile place until Israel took that prize recently. But more importantly, keep an eye on the Islamic State, but also keep an eye on the other rather adversarial actors in Syria, namely Russia and Iran. All right. And, again, when we're talking about light footprint, heavy footprint, I think Al-Tanf is exactly, what it's kind of what we are seeing across the world, and we will continue to see increasingly as far as US presence, a very light footprint, not in the typical way. Jason, back to you. Anything to add or ask Dee before I go on to? I can talk a little bit about the attack itself and what happened afterwards. We're interested.
You know me, I look at things from an intelligence perspective, and what would I be thinking? Not necessarily from the president on down, but at least from the ambassador from that regional, command area on down. And for me, as soon as I got the word that this was happening, as an intelligence agency, I would want to spool up my assets and want to know. We have an idea. The media is saying it's Iran. We pretty much know it is, but I would want to know solid, concrete evidence that it's Iran. So I'd be spooling up my assets. Who did it? What was that? The actual target? What was the end game here? Try to get those kind of things answered, so that when the president and Joint Chiefs and everyone else are briefed, that they have all the information. And the reason why this show is called Eyes On is because you have eyes on the target. We have eyes on who we think it is, but until we have solid intel, that's all it is. So that's the kind of stuff that I would want to be pushing.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I'm glad to hear it, Jason. I love. I'll bring in one of Jack's favorite terms. That when you have a gallery of people howling for, howling for blood and willing to expend the last drop of other people's blood on the American side to further the cause. All of us get a little concerned, without being snowflakes, right? But I think, well, I do know, what you say is exactly right. I mean, it's corroboration and it's removal of plausible deniability from Iran. That's in order to strike into Iran, or even, Iranian targets, Quds Force, which we've already done many times, Iraq and Syria, but to do it again, then certainly we need that smoking gun. KH. I mean, it's interesting. Pentagon spokesman said this had the hallmarks of KH.
KH is what?
Very good. Yeah. Qatar Hezbollah.
Okay.
Hezbollah, nothing to do with Big Daddy Hezbollah in Lebanon. Qatar Hezbollah is a pro-Iranian militia. Because you've seen and a group that no one's ever heard of before, right? I forget what it was, the Islamic Resistance, whatever it was, army claiming responsibility. But if you got a Pentagon spokesman mentioning KH and saying it has the hallmarks of, you can bet that there's some intelligence behind.
Sure.
That wasn't a throwaway line.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I mean. And I just want to talk a little bit about the aftermath of the attack, because I'm not sure this was in the media. So about an hour after the attack on Tower 22, and you can imagine, the absolute pandemonium there. I mean, these guys were not. I mean, they're Army reservists. They certainly not. It's not the same as if a drone had hit our TAF. Let me put it that way. It must have been very confusing. Well, another attack, another drone, similar type, suspected Iranian made, not quite a loitering munition, not that sophisticated, but it was a one-way suicide drone. Came into attack our TAF and was destroyed, all right, by one of the anti-drone systems they had there. I think it's a Coyote. It's a Raytheon system. Apparently, I've heard it's pretty effective, but if anyone out there has heard differently, please pile in. Which is a kind of a good news story. But my point being, this was a planned attack, and it was it wasn't just a lucky shot from some dude. The attack came from within Iraq. We know that much. So it is conceivable, certainly, that it was KH. And when people talk about the hallmarks of KH, it would be not just the type of drone, which was of Iranian manufacture, but it would be various other things, even down perhaps to the operators who used it. So it'd be interesting to see now. Jason, in answer to what you were talking about, yeah, right on target. It's very easy in kind of the silence after the strike, that stunned silence for people to be howling in that vacuum. So we need to do this or that. It's much more difficult to be in a leadership position, remembering that you're at the helm of the United States that has to be seen to act in a way that is in consort with U.S. law. Yes, I know that seldom happens, but that is what's going on. And the challenge, of course, is um, the smoking gun is intent, right? Did the Iranians intend for this to happen? Um, that's what the Iranians would like to assume, but the smoking gun is the fact that Iran has made these organizations capable
Capable.
of these
Yep.
attacks in the first
Yep.
place, right? Intent is icing on the cake.
Mm.
Could have they, Quds Force could have foreseen that their proteges would want to, exercise control of their weapons by themselves sooner or later.
Absolutely. And I think something else to think about too is the tangible um, benefits to Iran of this attacks like this. I mean, yes, you get you have the deaths and wounding of U.S. service personnel. You have the United States looking at its vulnerability in the area. You have them now, people within the U.S. Government and otherwise questioning administration and response, all that stuff. But they also have the benefit of turning the world's attention away from their own Iran's internal issues, the terrorism that
Right.
they're, all of
Yeah.
that stuff. So
Yeah.
something to think about.
Yeah, Jason, a really good point. So, when we're talking about striking back, and again, there's the the would-be warriors who say, yeah, we should strike right into Iran itself. Okay, and I'm not, I wouldn't say a blanket no to that, but I would say there's you've got to bear in mind some things. One thing is, the Persian mentality, very proud people. They do have a history, to include recent history of dissent. But if you strike Iran, you're going to watch everyone unite behind the regime, which is exactly
Same
what
exact thing that we would do.
yeah.
Same.
So we've
Yeah.
got to, I'm not saying obviously, hey, that's too high a price, but we've got to understand that that is the price, right? Just as in the same way as when we hit Soleimani, we knew likely that US servicemen would die in retaliation, right? It's got to be a deliberate decision.
Absolutely.
And that, yeah. And so, and there are, I mean, I think it's such a trite cliche saying we have a range of options, but there are a range of options, but they have to be imaginative. We can't do more of the same, right? What is more of the same? We have conducted, I think, 8 strikes. I'm not counting Yemen. I'm just talking Iran and Iraq and Syria since October the 7th, all right? To include 2 in which we specifically targeted IRGC personnel, both in Syria on, I believe it was 8 and 12 of November. So there are precedents, right? We've already killed Iranians in Iraq and Syria. We have not killed Iranians in Iran itself. In fact, the last time we killed Iranians that were not in Iraq or Syria was 1988 as part of an operation called Praying Mantis. And so my point is simply this. This is a big precedent. It's not simply, okay, hey, let's do this. And you know why we haven't done that? Because there is some kind of an unspoken understanding between the Iranians and the US on this. What are the real red lines? Okay. Yep. And the US and striking Iranian homeland is one of those red lines. And that is why the United States has been had a conciliatory effect on Israel whenever Israel goes on the war path demanding war with Iran. Yeah. So we'll see, but when I say range of options, it's got to escalate beyond what we've done so far. So what could that be? Well, it could be a comprehensive strike, right? Iraq, Syria, but also the Persian Gulf. Iranian naval assets, who knows, maybe infrastructure in the Persian Gulf, right? Which would also, have an economic impact on Iran. When I say strikes, I mean, if there is a smoking gun connecting the drone with, with IRGC, as I'm sure there is, then removing IRGC capability or severely diminishing, not just whacking 1 or 2 dudes, but I mean going after kingpins and facilities and infrastructure in such a manner that we prevent the IRGC from being able to operate effectively over a period of time. Okay, that's that's a reasonable expectation, and it hurts Iran, and it gives us a sense of plausible done. What were they doing there anyway? You say um, and it keeps us on the moral high ground. And there's, as you guys know, there's a whole welter of other stuff we do in the cyber realm that doesn't even get noticed or talked about. The dumb thing to do would be to go all hands out and send tens of thousands of troops out to the Middle East, where they provide just a greater effective target for the Iranians. The other dumb thing to do would be to withdraw troops from the Middle East, right? As I said, the pattern that we should maintain there is, light footprint bases, similar to our TAM for Tower 22, obviously well fortified, secure, armed with mostly, manned mostly with soft guys, but not mostly soft guys, as everyone knows, soft needs conventional forces in order to operate and survive. So conventional forces there as support, with soft doing the operations. You have minimal risk there, and you have greatest potential for strategic effect. Of course, the Iraqis are going to probably decide what our footprint is pretty soon within Iraq. You guys said
that was one of the questions I wanted to ask was what happens with that like tentative deal of us getting out of Iraq that they announced. Kind of does that throw a wrench in that? Are we going to stay in Iraq in terms of like SOF or whatever?
It certainly makes it more difficult for us, right? And as far as containing Iranian influence, but we weren't doing that great job of doing that anyway. We weren't containing Iranian influence by having military guys there. So obviously I'm not I'm not dismissing our dismissal from Iraq as being unimportant. What I am saying, of course, is that we can accomplish the mission from other places where we know we can maintain.
So quick, I got a question, like a layman question. What does it look like? Does it just look like more airstrikes more often? Is it sending like, 200 Rangers and a Delta squadron to go smoke, command and control guys? Like, what does it look like in terms of a response from the hit on Tower 22?
Yeah, sorry, Jason, go ahead. What do you?
No, you're a little bit closer to the strategic military response than I am. But I would think that for right now, what you don't fix what's not broken. If the airstrikes are working and we're hitting the targets that we want to hit and killing the people we want to kill, for lack of a better term, and it's all going to depend on we hit, what does Iran do? We hit, what does Iran do? It's just, I think it's going to depend on that. But I think all that other stuff you mentioned, the soft teams, the Ranger battalions, all that stuff, that's all brewing underneath, and they're ready to go, I'm sure, staged and ready to go, or at least the word has come down, be ready to go. But I think because we've set the precedent, and this is my opinion, set the precedent already between the Houthis and the strikes that we've done in Iraq and all, I think we might keep that up for a little bit and wait and see what Iran is the government's going to do. And something else to piggyback on what you're saying, Andy, it made me think about another benefit, quote unquote, for Iran is the entity that would be willing to go into Iran and has proven that they would do it, which is Israel. They've got their own stuff going on. So we can't necessarily call on them. Not saying that we won't, not saying that they can't, but it would appear that right now they're tied up, with what's going on in Gaza. So, that's another thing that not necessarily take off the table, but it's something we may have to say, okay, we'll have to keep that to the side, until the Israelis, give us the green light that they can do it.
Just to piggyback on what Jason said, and I agree, yeah, the strikes are largely, when I say working, they're certainly hurting Iran, I would imagine. But when I talk about a difference, an escalation, synchronizing strikes to remove a capability. Think about what we've been doing simply before is, something is done against us and we retaliate, but it's a proportional retaliation, right? And then we de-escalate. We kind of say, okay, that was it. Don't don't fuck around again, or we'll do it. Only it'll be worse next time, right? This time we need to ramp. We really need to hurt Iran's capability, all right, its ability to control those proxies, to have an effect on those proxies. We're hitting right at the point that hurt us, right? We're not going through some esoteric route through sanctions and all of that.
Right.
I mean, yes, we do. We continue to do that. But that, okay, it's not about just strikes. It's about what are those strikes doing, how they're coordinated and timed. That could have a different effect. When you talk about, and again, I invite people to chime in on this if they disagree. But when we're going against a state actor, the roles that soft play obviously change, right? So it's very little door kicking and grabbing people. The door kicking is normally involved in kinetic strikes, where you use soft, are normally involved in taking out key infrastructure where there is fear of collateral damage if we go in with strikes or for some other reason. Okay. If you think through a little bit, you can think of the types of infrastructure that might involve, right? And doubtless, again, I don't have any. No one's letting me into on the intel on this. I promise you guys, and
Yeah.
I wouldn't be talking about it. So this is all speculation.
Yes.
So can I like another question?
But
So
it's
I'm
going to be a smorgasbord,
yeah. So that's what I was gonna say. Like
right?
they have to be. I'm assuming their CIA and covert stuff is going to be a big factor in this, right? Because I'm assuming. So you want to hurt their capabilities. You want to hurt like how they supply their proxies with equipment, whether it's drones or ammo or money or whatever. So I'm assuming the CIA is going to have a hand in like hitting them there, which I'm sure they already do anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think people just want right now because like they're angry, especially the Twitter people. They want things to be blowing up again. We want to see some skyline shots of things blowing up, and it's. I don't know if that's exactly the right way of doing it.
One thing it won't be for sure. Well, I hope not. Will be a series of strikes simply against Qatar, Hezbollah. I mean, because the problem is more fundamental and endemic than that. We know that, and it's part of the same problem that's resulted in strikes on 40 cargo ships on the Red Sea in the last 3 months.
Yeah.
And not a single one of those was bound for Israel, right? There was all kinds of weird stories invented to attack these ships, but that's significant too. I mean, 12% of the world's shipping passes through the Bab al-Mandeb, the ban, as you probably heard. So yeah, it is time to take action, but it's got to be imaginative, right? I mean, it really does. It's not, we're beyond the era of carpet bombing countries and thinking that it's taught them anything. And as we talked about, it's just simply going to drive Iran. It's going to unite Iran.
Yeah.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
Ever since October 7th and like Israel's been hitting back on Gaza and Hamas, have these incidences spiked up with Iranian proxies? Whether obviously the Houthis, yes, it's spiked up, but like I'm talking like in Syria, hits on us.
Yeah, 160 attacks on U.S. troops bases since 7 October. That is a meaningless number unless you compare it to before, and I can't give you exact numbers, but many times, the numbers of attacks over the number of attacks over the 3 months.
So would part of the strategy of retaliating against us getting hit in Iranian proxies is trying to rein back Israel a little bit in Gaza?
Yes, certainly. So I would imagine, and whatever. Again, I mean, we'll talk more about this. I think Jason and my stance is probably going to be on this. Hey, look, we're bipartisan or apolitical, but we do criticize dumb policy when we see dumb policy regardless, right? Otherwise, this becomes an anodyne pablum show. But my point here is that it's not easy, yes, to chart a course here because Netanyahu is whacked, right? And yet we are hitched to his wagon. And for all kinds of reasons that you guys understand, very politically hitched to his wagon, regardless of administration. But we have this guy who's leading us, right? He's leading us into a bad place, and we're watching. We're facing. I mean, we're used to not being popular in parts of the country, but we're being heavily criticized even by our allies, and that should cause us to pause and think, right? Regardless, that's good policy to do that. But yes, in answer to your question, D, at the same time, behind the scenes, I'm sure that I know there's a good deal of pressure taking place, and mill to mill too, about trying to cut down on casualties. And I'll make a controversial. Actually, I won't make a controversial statement at all, because I'm still awaiting full permission to visit Gaza for my book. More to follow on that. Over to you, Jay.
And at the end of the day, Iran's gonna Iran. So they've proven historically that they don't necessarily operate in a vacuum. They want some sort of a conflict or some sort of an issue where they can operate. Now they can insert themselves, whether that was in the Gulf or in Iraq when we went into Iraq. And now look at the issues that are happening. It's always conflict, some sort of issue where they insert themselves. So whatever Netanyahu does, Iran has already taken full advantage of what's going on now. So I think that that's going to continue for the foreseeable future. So I think we say if I'm the president, which nobody wants, if I'm the president, you got to let all that external noise go and say, okay, we'll talk to you in a minute, Netanyahu. We got to handle what's going on now. Our 3 people are dead. We have to respond to it. So I think that it can be done. People are very black or white. Either you're all in or you're not in at all. And I don't think that that's how you should go, how we should govern, our military should respond. Like, Andy's been talking about, there's layers to it. We don't have to go all in, glass parking lot. We also don't have to, like he said, pull everybody out and say, okay, it's yours. We can layer our responses up to a point where we think that we're pushing too far and we're going to cross a line that's going to result in an all-out regional war. And then we don't have to necessarily step back. We just stop, like we did in first Gulf War. We stopped, short of, running into Iraq and just, running ripshod in there. And we just stopped, and we have that capability. We just have to, the administration and for future administration, because I don't believe that this is going to stop once, whether Biden's reelected or not. I believe that whoever is in charge needs to just cut out the external noise and all the crap on social media and, all that stuff, and just lead, listen to your military leaders and, move forward that way.
On a, yeah, I mean, I 100%, Jason, I couldn't agree more at the strategic level. And then, at the way down at the tactical level, it makes me think about our vulnerabilities, within the soft community. I mean, think about, there have been 6 very high profile US deaths overseas since 2017. Okay. I mean, that's not, but I mean, 2 incidents, right? 3 in Niger, 2017, and then the 3 here where US soft support personnel personnel supporting US soft were targeted and killed. And I think that's something we've got to be wary of in the future. I mean, there's a reason why Tower 22 was targeted, and there's probably a reason why the drone got through at Tower 22 and didn't get through, in Al Tanf. Al Tanf was on combat footing, and it was manned with soft personnel. Tower 22 was part of Jordan Hill. I mean, an hour or so away, you can get a beer and have a good time. It didn't feel like a war footing. These guys were, reservists, and they were engineers, not combat engineers. So, my point is that, yeah, we've got gaping vulnerabilities out there across the Middle East, even with a light footprint. And it isn't our soft guys who are going to be taking the brunt of these attacks. And we need to harden ourselves and really look at that soft part of our footprint going ahead.
I got a question about Tower 22. Did you guys see like some of the Twitter, like it was on Twitter mostly, like reports saying that it got hit because they tailed a friendly drone into there and they got in under that? I feel like, did you hear, is that true?
I can't say conclusively it's true. That came, I guess, from I don't know where it came from. It's supposedly from guys on the base.
Okay.
The Pentagon didn't deny that, but there's an investigation going on, obviously. I mean, think about it. I'm not denying it at all, but here's what I think happened, because I've seen this many times. Jason probably has too. People see things happen, and probably a US, a drone did return, and then shortly after the attack occurred, and people put two and two together. But it's actually very difficult to locate and follow a drone. All right. And it doesn't really I mean, it isn't, it isn't that easy. And it's hard to imagine them having done that and slipped through air defenses that way. But they did get through air defenses. So they did, they managed it somehow. And that's what the investigation should try and uncover.
Yeah.
Why did what succeeded in Tower 20, I mean, Al-Tav, that failed in Tower 22?
Yeah, I agree. I'm not a drone guy, so I can't say that, they were able to follow the track of the returning US drone. Anything is possible. It just doesn't, at this point, doesn't seem likely. But like Andy said, I think the key is what worked at the soft base that didn't work here, and vice versa, so I think we won't know the full story, if we know the full story, for probably months, to come. And in the interim, as they're finding things out, I'm sure that intel is getting out to other bases, as Andy spoke on, to harden, their defenses. So, because it's gonna keep happening. They're gonna keep testing these waters till it doesn't work, and then they'll try something else.
All right. Yeah. That sums it up beautifully, Jason. So, at this point, I mean, we don't want these to overrun. So we'll bring this to a graceful close. If you were a betting man, when would you expect the strikes to go in, Jason? What do you expect to see?
Me personally, I'm thinking probably by this coming weekend. I mean, we had the assets in place to do it. So what they are exactly, I don't know. But I think we have the capability to launch them probably before this weekend. But I would say we will start hearing about it probably by this coming weekend.
Your thoughts?
Yeah, next 3 to 4 days, probably, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we have to respond,
wouldn't it, to show response? And I mean, I would put money on. Okay, so I would put money on this. Okay, multiple IRGC directed strikes, simultaneous Iraq, Syria, but also Iranian naval assets in the Gulf.
Yeah,
Iranian naval assets in the Gulf. Potentially two, if they locate this factory, which isn't going to be difficult to do. If there was a strike into Iran itself, I would guess that it would be going after that factory, because obviously that's relevant, but it's also very easy to compartmentalize in terms of escalation.
Absolutely.
I would bet that they don't hit Iran, like Iran's mainland. I could see them blowing up a container ship or two that's heading to like Yemen or wherever.
$20.
Yeah, I'm in. I'll bet that. No, no inside of Iran, but I could see
Yeah.
them blowing up a ship because
All
that is
right.
something we've never seen before.
Bring cash with you on the 26th.
No problem. I'll have it.
I'll hold the money.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Any closing comments? Dean, what do you you've got a email address for us, right?
For
Oh.
eyes on, no, not yet, but we will have an email address for that. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm assuming so. Like, if anyone has like questions and stuff like that, they can email the teamhousepodcast
yeah.
at gmail.com. You can also write in the comments, and the comments might get lost in the sauce, but
Comments like get those clowns off the air.
nah, yeah, they'll be okay.
Oh, well,
And especially like don't tell we got to tell people to like, subscribe, check out the Patreon, tell your friends about this, whether you listen to it on
yeah.
Spotify or Apple, rate it 5 stars and review it on Apple. That helps too. So get engaged.
Yeah.
Yeah, all of the above. So, and I mean, on the email part of this, what we really want to do is spend, I don't know, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, maybe at the end of every episode, going through just a handful of input from
Right.
from the listeners, watchers, audience, and notice I said, not just questions. You're free to make comments. We will comment on your comments.
Yeah.
I agree.
So please do. And yeah, great.